I'm Dan Thomas from the UN Global Compact office here in New York, where the summit began 18 hours ago. Since we started, the summit has chased the sun around the world from Brazil and Latin America to Australia, Asia Pacific, China, Southeast Asia, South Asia and India. Next up, we'll be handing over to the Middle East region to hear from young people on the COVID-19 pandemic and their concerns and solutions for both the private sector and government. But before I hand over to my colleague Dima Jamali, the board chair of the Global Compact Network Lebanon, let me share a quick highlight film of how this Leaders' Summit began.
Hello delegates, welcome to the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit 2020.
More than 20,000 business professionals and sustainability experts have joined the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit already. On this virtual platform, attendees have been visiting booths to learn more about how the UN is engaging companies, networking with each other, and hearing from an impressive lineup of speakers.
Now more than ever, as big decisions are made about our future, companies need to address environmental, social and governance risks holistically and move beyond business as usual.
We can build a better tomorrow where we leave no one behind.
And it really does put the onus on businesses and the financial sector to help the world recover better.
The first and highest priority is to protect your staff and stakeholders, including your service providers, clients, and the communities in which you operate.
Listening to the scientists is crucial to dealing with the climate crisis.
Clearly, we need a strong global initiative now.
Leading CEOs from around the world also urged their peers to step up their SDG ambition.
And I'm very confident that together we will find ways to strike that right balance to make progress faster.
And this special film highlighted the 20th anniversary of the initiative.
And we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
The theme you will hear today over and over again is recover better, recover stronger, recover together.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for this exciting youth dialogue. I'm Dima Jamali, and I'm the president of the board for Global Compact Network Lebanon. Through my career, I served as professor at the American University in Beirut, and I had the opportunity to work with youth. So I really appreciate the immense energy and potential they can bring in terms of change. It's with great pleasure, therefore, that I'm moderating the session today that is organized jointly by the local networks of the UAE, Jordan, and Lebanon. And this session focuses on the role of the youth, especially in recovery post-COVID-19. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has created a global recession and uncertainty for the future of many. The youth are particularly vulnerable because this has affected sectors like education, economic opportunities, and health and well-being. While challenges faced by the youth are increasing, we see our youth responding with resilience and with innovative solutions. The Middle East, of course, has had its fair share of uncertainties and stress caused by COVID-19, and we see the youth through this crisis managing with resilience in facing the pressures of COVID-19. Today, we're very fortunate to have with us some very inspiring youth from the Middle East to share their stories on resilience, on recovery, and how they see the future post this COVID-19 crisis. Let me introduce our speakers very briefly. We have first Kevin Chalhoub, who is the founder of EV Lab and member of the family board of the Chalhoub family. After getting his master's in clean energy from Stanford, his passion for innovation and sustainability has led him to create EV Lab, which is the first electric vehicle multi-brand concept in the Middle East. In addition to all his entrepreneurial endeavors, Kevin has joined also his family business in Dubai, which is the Chalhoub Group, and this is the leading partner for luxury in the beauty, fashion, and gift sectors. Thank you, Kevin, for being with us this morning. Second, we have with us Lynn Malkawi, who is the founder and director of Wasil for Awareness and Education. She founded this NGO, which is called Wasil for Awareness and Education, which aims to to find a bridge between the youth of different geographical and socioeconomic backgrounds in Jordan through inclusive programs that focus on social, political, and economic development. She holds an MBA from the University of Texas in Arlington. Moving to Lebanon, we have Omar Itani, who is the co-founder and manager of FabricAID, and he is proudly the recipient of the Young Champion of the Earth title in 2019. FabricAID is not his first business venture, of course, but it is through this new venture, FabricAID, he's trying to help underprivileged communities to get access to quality clothing at affordable prices, as well as reduce the fabric waste and help the environment. Finally, we have Maya Terro, who is the co-founder and executive director for FoodBlessed. She describes herself as a hunger hero fighting hunger and food waste. She's always considered herself to be a social and political and environmental activist. And at a young age, she saw a great opportunity to address hunger and climate change by using food waste. And she holds an MA in public health and co-founded FoodBlessed, which is a great initiative aiming to eliminate hunger and making food accessible to those who need it the most. This is very briefly about our youth speakers, and really I'm honored to be moderating this session with such inspiring youth from the Middle East. I'm going to start the first round of questions, and of course we have to stick with time. So each panelist has about 2.5 minutes to address questions on recovery post-COVID-19. So I will start with you, Lynn, if you allow me. And first question to you, the world post-COVID will need a new mindset to recover an urgent need for new jobs, especially in the Middle East. How will youth be able to step in, and what opportunities can they bring to the table? Lynn,
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for the question, and it's a pleasure being among this panel. COVID-19 does not discriminate against its victims, but the economic impact of the pandemic does. As we go through this new financial crisis, we need to reflect on the last one in 2008. During the last recession, 2.1 million Americans were laid off in 2009 alone. However, at the same time, 7 of the biggest companies we see today were founded upon the 2008 recession by young people. Companies such as Uber, WhatsApp, Venmo, Airbnb, Slack, Pinterest, and Square. Even before that, Disney was incorporated in 1929, right as the Great Depression was getting started. But at that time, Walt Disney knew that people needed a smile on their face more than ever and took the risk of founding this venture. What we can observe is that technology paired with community needs is vital in these times. This is the time for youth to work on polishing their digital skills, as the opportunity in this day and age reigns in digitalization. It's no longer a luxury, but a necessity. Each country needs to use technology to capitalize on its competitive advantage for a lower cost and a better quality. For a country like Jordan, our greatest treasure is our human capital, which is 70% youth. And we need to give a serious look at exporting our human capital digitally. Youth can lead efforts to technologically transform sectors such as agriculture, food, and clothing that keep governments and businesses running amidst social distancing and future shocks that may arise.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Great answer. And thank you for the statistics. Turning to Kevin, you've been involved in entrepreneurship. And the question to you, how can entrepreneurship help in recovery post-COVID-19 based on your experience?
Sure. I mean, as Lynn mentioned, for us, it's a lot about job creation and opportunity. Starting with, the Chalhoub group, we've had to be very adaptable in these times, like many large organizations, and really adapt to these new realities. And it's really in those times of crisis, especially in those times of crisis, that we need to allow for entrepreneurship, not only in bad times. So we've developed our e-commerce solutions. This is where the demand has been and spiked. We had our program that was 900 days long shift to shift our brick and mortar company to a phygital company, both digital and physical hybrid. And it's only in these last 90 days that we've seen our e-commerce business grow from 3% to 20%. And where our workforce has adapted, frontliners taking jobs and responsibilities for e-commerce and really rethinking and imagining how they can help the organization and create these and really be relevant for the jobs of the future. So to that note, the jobs of the future, I've also started right before this this pandemic, I've started my company, the Electric Vehicle Laboratory, which aims to be a multi-brand concept store for electric vehicles. And these are the job of the futures that Lynn was talking about. And these are the moments to invest in them, as she mentioned. WhatsApp, Instagram, Uber, Airbnb, all have been created during the recession in 2008. And this is the moment to start thinking about how can we think of the jobs of the future. I mean, Al Gore yesterday interestingly said, that solar has created more jobs in the US, 3 times more jobs than the fossil fuel industry. And that's where we're really trying to go with this. Electric vehicles as well as solar are not only the jobs of the future, but of the present now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kevin. Turning to Maya, the question is that you've been an advocate for decreasing food waste and want to know how your organization has responded to this pandemic, COVID-19, and how it can contribute even more post-recovery.
So, as an advocate of both food rescue and hunger relief, as we know, food security is strongly associated with hunger and poverty, both of which are highly prevalent in Lebanon. And it's considered a global health problem with long adverse consequences on health. Much like everywhere in the world, the pandemic has impacted global food systems. It has disrupted regional agricultural value chains and posed risks to household food securities. This meant an increase in food prices, the lack of access to food for some, or the unavailability of food for others. In Lebanon, prior to the corona pandemic, Lebanon was already going through political unrest with an unprecedented economic meltdown on the way, all of which has posed a big threat to the middle income class, which was able to stand in the face of these atrocities before, but with the pandemic, it has now unfortunately joined the lower income class, which already was in a bad place to start with. So the folks in this class, the ones that can be found way under the poverty line, are now considered severely food insecure and as a result are facing extreme hunger. With one of the worst economic breakdowns in the history of Lebanon, and with more mouths to feed, it was only natural for the work we do in hunger relief to increase considerably. And while the rest of the world was social distancing themselves at their homes, we at FoodBlessed have been working tirelessly to provide food assistance packages with basic food commodities to folks in need across Lebanon. Since October, our nationwide hunger relief campaign called Beat Hunger LB has almost doubled the amount of food boxes we pack and deliver. Nowadays, we pack and deliver anywhere between 800 and 1,000 food assistance packages on a monthly basis. In terms of food waste, with the majority of social events on hold and restaurants only catering to their customers via delivery apps, the amount of cooked food we usually rescue has subsequently come to a halt as well. Food close to expiry and unsold fruits and veggies, though, are still being rescued on a weekly basis, although the amounts have somehow increased, given that the purchasing power of many Lebanese households has plummeted significantly, resulting in more food items being unsold. I believe that FoodBlessed has a huge role to play in the road to recovery, especially when and as long as the Lebanese government is failing its citizens time and time again by depriving them, especially the destitute, of one of their most basic human rights, the right to food.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I totally agree with really that we have a major food crisis that is at the door in Lebanon. Turning to Omar, and knowing that you're a successful entrepreneur, what advice can you give other youth in Lebanon and in the region in order to face the current hardships associated with the COVID-19 crisis?
It's basically one advice with two edges. First, start from wherever you are. You don't need to have an investment or investors or an office or any sort of capital to start working on a project and to develop a minimal viable product. The vast majority of minimal viable products can be developed through minimal investment. We hear a lot youth in Lebanon, especially at this point, because of the extremely high 45% unprecedented unemployment rate. The people say, okay, we have ideas and we would like to work on something, but we don't have the capital to start our initiatives. It shouldn't be this way. I truly believe that nobody should give somebody an idea, nobody should give an idea money. You give a minimal viable product, you give some traction money so you can build on it. But the first initial traction should be reached without any capital investment. And this is not like theoretical. We are not building rocket companies. For FabricAID, the way we reached the minimal viable product without investing anything, we worked with a municipality. They gave us a space. So this space was used for distribution. We collected clothes from people we know through phone and broadcast. We went to their houses. We got the clothes. We sorted them at our houses. We cleaned them at our houses, and then we displayed them using recycled material. So we had a small pop-up market that more than 1,000 people came and purchased from. And this working capital that was generated from this activity proved that there's a huge demand for affordable clothing in Lebanon, and that there's a lot of people who are willing to donate clothes. And reaching the minimum viable product with minimal investment is extremely important. That's the first advice. And the second advice is you need to start with the resources and to capitalize on the resources that you have, using and benefiting from the people who suffer from the problem. So to understand a market and understand the needs, especially that currently they are changing at a very fast rate, you shouldn't rely solely on consultants, on Google, on international. What you really need to do your research on are people who are suffering from the problem. You need to talk to them, to ask them. Usually they have solutions for those problems, not very efficient or effective solutions, but nonetheless some sort of solution. You need to listen to the people, understand their pains, understand how they solve the problems, and the vast majority you will get your solution and basically your business model from the people who are suffering from this problem. And not research.
So important, and I couldn't agree more. First, that you need to leverage whatever support is available to you and don't make capital as a constraint. And second, that you need to talk to your beneficiaries and understand their needs and base your model on that. So very, very nice insights, and so thankful to you as well, Omar. We're turning to round two, and round two is mostly on sustainability. And the first question, again, we're going with the same order, turning to you, Lynn. So what kind of government and civil society and private sector support can be made available to youth in order to sustain whatever efforts they're trying to make post-COVID-19?
So, firstly, deregulation efforts need to be put in play, as well as subsidies, I think, by different governments to encourage the development of the sectors I talked about earlier. This is the time to deregulate certain sectors to help industries boom and allow for new ones to appear. It needs to create a friendlier environment that allows for the rise of new ideas. Jobs will be lost in certain industries, and that's a fact. So we need to start acting in ways to help transfer these jobs into rising sectors that will rise due to the demand of the national economy. We need to provide a platform for existing businesses to enhance and grow. One example is relieving companies that reinvest their profits in their businesses from taxes on those profits. Civil societies, corporate social responsibility programs from the private sector, as well as governments, need to focus on the establishment of small to medium-sized businesses. In Jordan, small to medium-sized businesses constitute over 70% of the economy. In Jordan, the Ministry of Social Development created a fund that accepts donations for the COVID-19 response, in which Jordanians and the private sector have collaborated greatly too. Once things settle down and we're out of this emergency stage, it's very important for a parallel fund, I think, to take place in many countries, a cooperative investment fund developed that accepts donations to help fund new technological advances, such as the ones we talked about, from the people to the people. Increasing that's a very important note. Jobs will be, as we approach the new era, even after the lockdown period is over, companies must look at ways to reduce overheads. Flexible work conditions, work from home, renting smaller office spaces, and hiring part-time employees is a way for cost reduction. Every recession, it yields innovation that raises the bar at the end. Upon containment, like I said, investment in new technologies that can allow for self-sufficient and transfer lost jobs to other forms is what will get us through this crisis, I think.
Thank you so very much, and very good insight that not only in Jordan, but across the Middle East, SMEs and small businesses constitute more than 80% of the economic landscape and the ecosystem. So I think assistance to these sectors, whether through the private sector or through government, becomes really paramount. So turning to you, Kevin, the same question. What role do you see for policymakers, for governments, and for large companies in helping the youth across the Middle East in post-recovery?
Sure. All governments around the world kind of tackled, when faced towards this pandemic, the issue kind of in a similar way with a three-step plan. Number one, remediate to the sanitary crisis. So apply social distancing by ventilators, by masks, and really tackle the real problem, which is this COVID-19 spread. Number two, inject cash, even if it means raising a lot of debt in the economy. And it's the right moment to do so, in times of pandemic, when everyone's staying at home and there are less opportunities. And number three, this is where we're at, is what do you do with all this debt raise? Obviously, you help certain large companies, you help a lot of different entities that have existed, but you also invest in the jobs of the future and you invest in tech. As Omar mentioned, this is the best moment for you to build a minimum viable product, for governments to invest in technology for the future, because that's the future and that's how they'll be able to repay that debt. this is the moment to really 29 of 30 29 of the 30 largest tech companies out there are in the US. And today it's the perfect opportunity for the rest of the world to catch up, really. Just going into the business side as well, large corporations, to take the example of Chalhoub, we've started this incubator program, the Greenhouse, a couple of years ago, where we incubate some startups and their ideas. And you know, during this pandemic is when we've had the most demands for some of the services of these startups, and they've really grew up to this challenge and to scale. This is where we're testing their scalability. So really allow for creative solutions for tech investment, whether it's in the governments or in your large organizations. That's what will create the jobs of the future.
I love it. And I'm going to come back to you to tell us more about this incubator towards the end. Maya, the question is a bit similar, but from the perspective of the NGO that you're leading, how are you able to leverage partnerships, and what kind of partners were really helpful to you through this crisis? And, how much can we depend on partnerships in a post-recovery?
Well, being the community-based and volunteer-driven organizations we are, since its establishment, FoodBlessed has relied heavily on community members in anything it used to need. So while previously we relied heavily on a mix of in-kind and donations, with the majority of our in-kind donations being the food items that we used to usually collect by hosting food drives in collaboration with schools and businesses and scouts and universities, etc. We used to ask them to donate to our food boxes, the food items we usually need. With the pandemic, all of this has changed. Nowadays, we rely purely on monetary donations for two main reasons, these being safety and affordability. By purchasing and packing the food items using the money we raise from our individual donors, we ensure that what goes in each food parcel is safe. We also make sure to max out the money value of the donations we receive by buying in bulks from the wholesalers, which saves us a lot of time and a lot of money versus if our donors were to buy the stuff themselves at the market price, which is crazy high in comparison. In terms of partnerships, FoodBlessed has always relied on individual donors. We don't have huge major companies donating to our cause because we believe that being community-based, community members can play a huge role, and it's not always money. We also rely heavily on volunteers because everyone in FoodBlessed is a volunteer. We have 0 staff. And a huge load of our hunger relief and food rescue work entails working with local community members, as mentioned earlier. These have included schools, scouts, universities, but also, and more so now, with the pandemic, we have always worked with diverse array of local NGOs that cater to different vulnerable communities. And now these vulnerable communities have been severely hit by the pandemic. So other than working with NGOs that focus on hunger relief, we are realizing that now more NGOs are reaching out to us, and these NGOs work with drug addicts, people with physical needs, the elderly, abused kids, and even the LGBTQ community, among others. We also have always partnered with a small and select group of socially driven companies and brands, which have been, for example, like Zata Rosette or Prill, for instance, who have been of immense help to the work we do in terms of hunger relief. And lastly, our work has always entailed working with local municipalities, which has seen a huge rise after many municipalities, especially those in rural areas, and are usually left behind, have been reaching out to us to help them provide food parcels for the most at need in their communities.
Yeah, so great. So definitely you've had a significant scope for partnerships and leveraging on partners, whether NGOs, whether the private sector, less so the government in Lebanon, I would think. Okay, so turning to you, Omar, similar question. First, what kind of advice do you give the youth based on your experience that can they can use and they can replicate. But also, how much have you had to turn to partners and external support in terms of setting up your ventures? Were you able to leverage on any kind of partnership support? What was the approach? What are some tips that you can give in this regard as well?
So it's a multi-level process. Uh, in Lebanon, our particular situation is that you cannot expect any governmental support. Uh, on the contrary, anything that comes from the government, it's most probably going to slow you down, or it's very bureaucratic, corrupt, taxes. You won't get anything that would help you from the government. And the private sector in Lebanon is already struggling. And that's a fact. So, but in the same time, there's a silver lining. Since the government is corrupt and can't produce any benefit, and we have a lot of problems in religious organizations and all the main organizations in Lebanon, we have a lot of scandals and corruption issues against them. So the public doesn't trust them. But the public needs to trust something. That's a human need that we have. And in youthful initiatives, they can put and invest their trust. We didn't receive any trust from any benefit from the government, but through people and community, back to what Maya was saying, we've built an entire company. Our organization chart was built from a Lebanese consultant who worked in Accenture. Our first seed investment was from a Lebanese who works abroad. Our financial model was made by a Swiss Lebanese banker. So we've received tremendous help from people who want to give back to their communities, but they don't know what to do. Since there's no governmental support and the main organizations are weak or unstable in Lebanon, people want to give back and people want to be part of change. So youth in Lebanon have a great opportunity to be this source of inspiration for people and to be the method people give back to their community. To be able to do this correctly, I think gratitude is extremely important. So how do you drive more and more people to align with your cause and to invest more in it through time, volunteering, effort, connections, network, whatever the investment was? A major part of it is, of course, building traction and showing that you are doing your job correctly, but more also gratitude. Whenever somebody helps, it's quite important to go out and say that this person have helped, this person have to do this and that, and this will make even when you want to give back to your community, there is some ego and selfishness involved, which is not bad. The reason I started FabricAID, I'm sure there's some selfishness involved in it, and I don't think that selfishness is a bad thing at all. It's important to play on that and to give people gratitude and to give them self-assurance, and this will make them even more invested in your initiative, and this will drive even more people to give back to your cause.
That's absolutely fantastic. And especially I like your idea about the youth as a source of inspiration, and I want to build on this. We have time, so I will give you more time in this last segment to just comment exactly on this point. What is the role of the youth now in the future? And as we look at it to the future, post-COVID-19, what is the role of the youth? What is the role of the other actors as well? And, how do you see this future through your own eyes and based on your experience? So it's the same question to each of the speakers. You can take 2-3 minutes to answer because we're doing good on time. I'll start with you, Lynn.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to start by quoting our King Abdullah. He wrote an article in the Washington Post, and he said, but this time, let's do it right. Instead of deglobalization, as some are advocating, I see all benefiting from a re-globalization. This time, we must concentrate on getting it right, aiming for a renewed integration of our world that centers on the well-being of its people. A re-globalization that strengthens and builds capacities within our countries and ushers in true cooperation rather than competition. A re-globalization that recognizes a single country acting alone cannot succeed. One country's failure is every country's failure. So I would like to see personally a future that is more equal and that gives us more access to opportunities for people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. First, countries need to recalibrate the balance between full self sufficiency and deep interdependence. Full self sufficiency is neither possible nor desirable in today's age. But COVID 19 has demonstrated some of the vulnerabilities that come with relying on global supply chains for essential items like medical supplies. Some recalibration is needed. A second, I'd like to talk about business regulators will need to consider how best to balance efficiency and resilience. Just in time approaches to manufacturing are economically efficient but make supply chains vulnerable to disruption. That's another important point that would like to see in the future change. Most pertinent to this issue is the issue of access to digital technologies. Think of the pressure on governments today to deliver governance and services in the age of social distancing. The feeling of parents whose children cannot access educational opportunities, or demands from historically marginalized groups who may not be able to work remotely. Life, protection, and livelihood will all need to be guaranteed virtually, and most capitals around the world will struggle to provide these. Some positive transformations will be driven by technology companies looking to break new ground and compete for consumers among the millions of social and commercial interactions that will now be permanently online. So I hope that this COVID 19 encourages ways for us to reach, to, to give people more access to technology, more access to the internet that allows for a better and level playing field for people to grow and develop. This is what I hope. And I think with the amazing youth that we have in the region, that we can do that.
So this is really, really amazing insight and feedback, especially if I summarize it in two key points. More equality. You would like to see a future where we have more equality and basic human rights, and also a future where we have more digital inclusion and technological breakthroughs that are made accessible to the youth. Very nice. Turning to you, Kevin, what future do you see? Or
Sure,
would you like to see?
If there is one learning really we have during this pandemic, amidst the trouble, the tough times, the tragedies, we have set one precedent that hadn't been set before. Is that, regardless of religion, gender, race, or other, we've all gathered, or nationality, we've all gathered with one common enemy and one common purpose, defeating this pandemic and this common enemy external to human. And this really gives me a lot of hope, because with this precedent set, we can tackle even bigger and greater issues around the world with this global cooperation. When we think of climate change, we won't require everyone to stay at home, but we'll require the same level of community engagement. And that's through job creations. Quite the opposite. Go out there, install solar panels. But it's the first time we see that with a common purpose, we can achieve great things. I don't think, for example, that George Floyd's death would have gotten as viral and allowed for as many protests if COVID-19 hadn't happened. But we're now used to tackling issues larger than us and ourselves together. And once again, the same goes to climate change. It's possible now to tackle issues on a global scale altogether, regardless of our differences and come together as a human race. So I'm very helpful, and the youth really, with no bias, has an important role to play in setting the stage for solving these common issues, and setting hope for with this common purpose to really change the world and reshape it in a better way.
I couldn't agree with you more, Kevin, and really some very good insights that COVID-19 has made us realize that we're so interconnected as a humanity, and we face the same challenge. We were trying to adopt the same solutions, and also it kind of like now in the age of globalization, we're all more or less facing similar issues and trying to come up with also similar solutions. I totally agree with the point that you said about Floyd, and I think that this has highlighted that the problem of racism is also, even in the US, is so entrenched, and that we all have more to do to address inequality and human rights issues across the globe. So thank you so much for your insights. So turning to you, dear Maya, also I want to ask you about, from your perspective, from your experience in the NGO field, working with people in very poor areas, with youth also in terms of community development, what kind of future do you see for our youth in this region? And what do they need to capitalize on?
So I've been volunteering from a very young age, almost 14. I have always believed that one has to be the change they want to see happen around them. And so it comes to no surprise that the future, I hope, for Lebanon and the world as a whole is one where each one of us takes responsibility of the choices they make on a daily basis, especially the youth, since they will be leading the way in the future. So be it social or responsibility, we need to take things to our own hands, especially when the Lebanese government, for example, has failed us time and time again. The post-COVID future that I want to see is really no different than the one I have been working so hard to realize for the past 10 years or so. I hope really that more of us, especially the young generation, will start contemplating the implications of their daily habits, and by doing so, will realize the need to make more mindful decisions in their day-to-day lives. Take food, for instance, because that's my everyday thing. FoodBlessed has been working really hard to make people realize that the type of food we buy, the way we cook and consume it, why and how we discard it, all of this and more not only affects us, the consumers, but also the planet and those living in it. It is unacceptable for hunger and food waste to exist simultaneously. It just makes no sense at all, not economically, not socially, not environmentally, and most of all, especially not morally. We all have a role to play. And on this note, I want to wholeheartedly thank each and every single person who donated their time, effort, skills, and money towards FoodBlessed cause. As always, we say and believe every little bit goes a long way, and the right time to start is now.
Great. So be the change that you want to see, take action, don't be passive, believe in yourself and your ability to make change. So very good advice. And I'm going to come back to you, start thinking about piece of advice. This is going to be our concluding statement from each of you to our youth. If you want to summarize everything you said in 3 pieces of advice, 2 or 3 pieces of advice, what would they be? But first, let me have Omar comment on how he sees the future from the perspective of the youth post-COVID-19. What kind of future do you see? And, what do we need to do in order to get to this future?
Sure. To look at the future, you need also to look at the past and to see the trends. This is not the first financial crisis we have. We had one in 2009, and we had the dot-com bubble in 2000, and we had the failing of the Asian markets back in the 90s. Every 10 years, we have a major financial problem. Today, Apple was valued at its highest valuation ever, being the first American company to be valued at $1.5 trillion. In the same time, there is an extremely high level of unemployment in the US and all the turbulence that's happening. Is one of the biggest yacht markets in the world. It's a country with 4 million citizens that sells 500 Porsche Panameras per year, but in the same time, we don't have a public transportation system. So, from my view, our issue is not only that our economy is stagnated. Our issue is that our economy is not fair. And it works in a way that will continuously crash no matter what we do and no matter how much we invest. And I'm a big advocate of technology, but no matter how much we invest in it and we expand on it, it will continue. The economy will continue to crash because the basis of this economy is based on vicious capitalism. And I'm an advocate of capitalism. I think it drives people to be more and more effective and efficient. But in the same way, it can be extremely unfair. For the future to be bright, fair, prosperous, we need to have a shift of influence and a perception of success and what success is. Is success having a yacht and a Porsche Panamera and having those outfits on Instagram and taking those pictures? If this is success, then I don't think the future will be bright or prosperous. But if the success living in a more homogeneous society, then and that's how people are convinced of this vision of the future, then I think yes, we might have this future. But in order to achieve it, we need to set our economy in a different way. We need to ensure that we have a tax system and economy that rewards startups and companies, corporates, whatever their size is, NGOs that work on building a more resilient society. And at the same time, we have laws and regulations and taxes that punish companies that do harm to their communities. Through this type of regulation, I think we can have a very prosperous future, but nothing is for sure. We might continue in this loop and in this wheel. Will help us be like in a good economy for quite a couple of years, and then a crash, and a good economy, then a crash, a good economy, then a crash, unless we break the wheel. And the only way we can break this wheel is through a different perception of success and laws and regulations and society actions and activism that ensures that those who do well are rewarded and those who do bad are punished.
So, to summarize, economic and social issues are deeply interconnected, and from your perspective, the economy in Lebanon will continuously crash unless we address fundamental inequalities that are so entrenched in our system. And what you're advocating for is some kind of a capitalism with a conscience. Yes, we are all for capitalism, but we need a kind of capitalism that also addresses inequality, is conscious of inequality, and can work more with some kind of conscience and regulation. Very, very insightful. Thank you so much, Omar, for sharing with us your insights, and each of you have been an inspiration today. And I want to give you the floor, like 1 minute each in less. What are the key pieces of advice that you want to summarize based on this entire conversation addressed to the youth of the region? Starting with you again, Lynn, 2-3 pieces of advice from your perspective.
Sure.
1 minute.
One thing I'd like to say, sure, there's no point in looking back at the world that was, because now we're moving towards a different kind of world. So 3 pieces of advice I give is develop your skills digitally. It's the time to take risks, and it's very important to develop partnerships because one hand cannot clap alone. But I also would like to add to what Omar said. It's time for all of us to work towards a more homogeneous society, to try to develop and empower young people that are trying to create a better future. Thank you.
Beautiful. I love the advice. Don't look back, look forward, and equip yourself. Kevin, your advice.
I couldn't agree more as well. So just to summarize, I would say there will be a post COVID-19. So do be helpful and advocate for changes in your community, in your local communities. As Maya has brilliantly said, this is the moment to use this sprint and advocate for and reshape the world in a way we want it to be as youth. So as Omar mentioned, there are limits to hyper-capitalism. So to government, I say build a social safety net that will allow your economy to thrive. Don't take example of the US that doesn't have a social safety net. Take example of economies that have a good balance. I would say a message of hope, really. There will be a post-COVID-19 and we'll come stronger out of it.
And the youth should be, in this post-COVID-19, main advocates of change. I love it. Maya, your advice to our youth.
Advice is something I've always told myself, and most of the Lebanese youth are really hopeless. So I usually say, do what you can where you are with what you have. So don't let anyone or anything limit you, because sometimes when you have the idea to create change, a lot of people will be against you and it will make you feel like you're doing something wrong. It's usually the opposite, because those who are really considered crazy are the ones who eventually end up changing the world. So always believe in yourself, because that's the hardest thing, to be yourself when everyone else is asking you to be someone else. And just don't procrastinate. Start where you are with what you have and learn as you go.
Keep going. Don't let anything stop you. Believe in yourself. Thank you, Maya. You have 20 seconds, Omar, for your advice.
I think it's a quite simple one, but it's quite profound. Don't link your happiness and your self-satisfaction and self-worth to success or to a future goal. Make sure that this is linked to your day-and-day life, that your happiness is linked and your satisfaction is linked to how ethically and how properly you do stuff. And this can be a game changer.
I love it, especially the moral compass. Thank you, each one of you. Brilliant insights and great panel. Thank you so much for being part of this. And I think we're out of time. Literally, we're out of time, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our global compact networks in the Middle East region for working together to bring us that interesting perspective. And thank you for your contribution to this 20th Anniversary Leaders Summit. Good morning to all our friends and colleagues in Europe and Africa who are just beginning the day 2 with us here at the UN Global Compact 20th Anniversary Leaders Summit. I'm Dan Thomas from the UN Global Compact office here in New York. It's now 3 in the morning here, and since the summit began, we've been chasing the sun around the world, from UN headquarters here in New York to Brazil, Latin America, Australia, Asia Pacific, China, Southeast Asia, South Asia, India, and the Middle East. Next up is a cornerstone discussion on the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, moderated by South African broadcaster Nazifo Shabalala. But before we hand over to Europe, let's just share with you a quick highlights film of how this Leaders Summit began.
Hello delegates, welcome to the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit 2020.
More than 20,000 business professionals and sustainability experts have joined the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit already. On this virtual platform, attendees have been visiting booths to learn more about how the UN is engaging companies, networking with each other, and hearing from an impressive lineup of speakers.
Now more than ever, as big decisions are made about our future, companies need to address environmental, social, and governance risks holistically and move beyond business as usual.
We can build a better tomorrow where we leave no one behind.
And it really does put the onus on businesses and the financial sector to help the world recover better.
The first and highest priority is to protect your staff and stakeholders, including your service providers, clients, and the communities in which you operate.
Listening to the scientists is crucial to dealing with the climate crisis.
Clearly, we need a strong global initiative now.
Leading CEOs from around the world also urged their peers to step up their SDG ambition.
And I'm very confident that together we will find ways to strike that right balance and make progress faster.
And this special film highlighted the 20th anniversary of the initiative.
And we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
The theme you will hear today over and over again is recover better, recover stronger, recover together.